everyone and welcome to Tribe Talk. You're here with Rachel Evans
and Laura Neal.
If you're a parent that is worried about family contact over the summer holidays, well, this episode is for you.
Lots of parents and carers worry about family contact, particularly over the summer holidays. It tends to be the time when more family contact is planned or longer family contacts are planned. And it can almost feel like you're waiting for that contact to happen because you know that your child is going to become more distressed beforehand or afterwards. So it becomes this big thing that is looming over the summer holidays. So what can we do about that?
So for some children, family contact can be positive and enjoyable, but for other children, this can bring up lots of complicated emotions, lots of conflict in emotions that are difficult to understand, and creates a lot of anxiety for parents when family contact comes around.
Parents can usually feel really anxious because they don't know how their child is going to respond. This is a huge thing, family contact, for both the child and the family as well, whether you're an adoptive family, foster family, or you're a birth family that doesn't all live together and the family contact is with another family member. But family contact brings up lots of anxiety for parents, genuinely because they're worried about how their child is going to respond, how their child is going to be feeling, the impact that that's going to have on their child. And there are lots of different impacts by family contact.
Yeah, I think parents feel particularly anxious when that time comes, isn't it? When the lead up to family contact, how is contact going to go and what are we doing afterwards? I think there's so many variables at play. There's so many different situations that can kind of happen during those 3 stages that brings a lot of anxiety for parents, because it brings a lot of the unknown in relation to how their child might respond to that.
And I think that unknown mirrors the child's unknown really as well. So for some children, they will really enjoy family contact, they'll like going, it'll be a really positive experience, as you said earlier, Rachel. But for others, they'll actually worry about a lot of things. So if it's with a parent, for example, is my parent going to turn up? What are they going to bring with them?
Yep.
Are they going to play with me? If there's siblings, it could be, is my sister going to get more attention than I am? It could be an unspoken feeling, just this uneasiness of going to contact, or, well, why can't I stay with mum and dad if I go and see them in contact? Why do I have to come back here? All of these emotions and all of these questions come up when contact time is around. And this is why carers and parents see this spike in behaviour, really. So contact is coming, the child knows contact is coming up. Few days beforehand, you see this spike of unsettledness, and that can come out as emotional outbursts, behavioural outbursts. It can come out as withdrawal sometimes as well. And you don't always know what you're going to get, or with your child you might know this is how they're going to respond, but it's anxiety provoking to know that they're going to respond that way, because actually you want them to feel safe and settled and cared for and loved, and this is a disruptive element within their week or their summertime.
Yeah, and I think because that brings about so much anxiety for parents, that in turn makes us change how we respond, so how we communicate when contact is happening. We know that there's going to be a spike in behaviour, and we almost want to avoid that from happening. And also in this podcast, we want to normalise that. We know for children certain changes for them, like family contact happening, might be a little bit unsettling for them, and that's normal to feel as a parent, and giving you the confidence to know things that you are putting in place to prevent some of those things from happening. You're doing a good job, and helping you with some tips that you can take away to ease some of that anxiety as well.
Before we get more into that anxiety of contact and why we worry about it, I think it might be helpful to think about why contact is beneficial and the aims of it, really.
Yeah.
So for most of our children that we support, they're in foster care or residential care, and family contact is a way of them keeping in touch with their birth family. So for many it will be their birth parents that they go and have contact sessions with, but it could be siblings as well, it could be grandparents that they're having contact sessions with. And the aim of that contact is to maintain those family relationships, and that is really important because that is the child's birth family. It's part of their identity, it's part of who they are, and if they can have positive contact with their family, it's only going to serve them in helping them develop their identity, their sense of belonging, and their sense of being really wanted within the world as well. If we can create a positive contact environment, and that's the overall aim, is that children have positive contact experiences. They might not be able to live with family members, but they can have those positive experiences when they do see them. So there is a real purpose to contact, and we have seen it where it is so beneficial, and we would really advocate for it because we know what happens when those relationships aren't maintained and children feel rejected, or as if they've been left, and there can be a lot of self-blame there. So we want to promote contact but also make it as positive as possible for children, but there's lots of things we need to do as adults to do that, and I think it's some of those things then that can filter into the anxiety that parents can feel when they're taking their child to contact.
Yeah, that's key, isn't it? It's how contact is planned for. Because I was gonna, as you were talking, I was gonna add to the point of identity. I think that is so important with children that are care experience, and having those links with their birth family where it's appropriate, but knowing where they've come from, what the family is like in terms of their parents, their siblings, if they're not living with their siblings. I think that's so important that they maintain or know a bit about their background and their identity and where they are, because we do work with some children that don't have that family, they don't have the opportunity to have family contact, and that brings up a lot more questions for them around where have I come from,
who am I,
why don't no one want me, where is my family when I'm living with someone that's got a family and they go to contact. So all the reasons that you just described, but in terms of what I was thinking as you were talking, identity is something that's so important that should be maintained, through family contact.
Yeah, and even if contact is not always as positive, so we all know with contact that there will be parents who can't show up consistently. Maybe the contact isn't as lovely as we would all love it to be.
Or the messages or the conversations that happen during contact aren't particularly appropriate to share with a child.
Yeah, and not always supporting the child as best they can be. That doesn't always mean that contact should stop completely, because we have to work with what we've got, and even if it's a parent that doesn't show up consistently, yes, that can be upsetting for a young person, but over time, with the right support, they can learn that that person is still part of their identity. That person does show up when they can, but they can also develop some resilience for how they're going to deal with that as well. Whereas if we take that away completely, it doesn't give those opportunities, and that difficulty will come up again, but it will just come up later within the child's life when they either seek contact out themselves or that they haven't had that contact, and it's impacting on their sense of identity and belonging later on. So it always comes up at some point. So dealing with what we've got in the moment is the best way of doing things, really, and looking at how can we make this as positive as possible for a young person.
So I guess what we're saying in this podcast is that we know that there's lots of different considerations that come into planning family contact and that going ahead, but being advocates for family contact going ahead, and even though as parents we might feel a bit of anxiety about family contact time coming up, because we know that can be a little bit unsettling maybe for your child, but what can we be doing to support family contact, to make it as positive as possible for all the reasons that you've just described, because there's so many benefits to family contact. But overcoming some of that anxiety that we might be feeling to promote family contact.
Because it is completely normal as well. So some of the anxiety that we feel comes from, how is my child going to respond to this? But it is completely normal when you don't see somebody for a prolonged period. For some children it might be 6-12 weeks that they're not seeing the person that they're going to see in contact for, and then they do see them. That is going to bring up some anxiety. It would for any child. But remembering that this is a parent or a grandparent, it's going to bring up more of that anxiety around, will they turn up? It's completely normal. And if we can normalise how that feels for us, we can reduce our own anxiety and be able to advocate and promote contact as best we can in the best way for the child, which is ultimately what we want.
So if we move on to some helpful tips that we can take away from this podcast to help promote positive family contact, I think there's different things that we can be doing to before contact even happens, during contact, and then also after. But before contact even happens, I think just helping with the preparation around contact, what we communicate to children. If we plan ourselves, it reduces a lot of the anxiety that we are feeling. So we are also planning for what we should expect. So if we know that maybe a family member is a little bit inconsistent in turning up to contact, what is the plan around that? How are we communicating the plans to the child? And if we have a plan, A, B, C and D, I think that helps reduce a lot of our anxieties, and you kind of feel involved in that plan. I think when plans are executed in that way, where you feel like you have created that, whether that's with a professional, I think that helps relieve a lot of the anxieties that we might be feeling.
If you fail to prepare, then you prepare to fail. So, and this is definitely the case in this situation, that if you fail to prepare for the contact, then you are going to feel hugely anxious about it. So I think as a parent or carer, preparing your side, like what does it look like? What am I doing? What am I communicating to my child? And there is support around you that will be able to help you with that, in terms of social workers, people that are supporting with the contact. So always make sure that we're preparing.
Yeah, it just helps us feel a little bit less anxious being involved in that. And then some things that we can do during that contact. So contact is happening. You might even be involved in that contact, or allowing that contact to be supervised by somebody else. So what can we be doing in that moment to help relieve some of the anxieties that we might be feeling? So if you are sitting on the sidelines then and the contact is being supervised, just preparing in advance, like how is that interaction going to be when the child comes out. You could be thinking about things like that. Maybe you need to keep yourself busy whilst that contact is going ahead. Take the time to engage in some self-care yourself. The advice might be so, thinking about when that contact is going on, what you can be doing to be supporting yourself.
What you want to do with contact as well is, I think, set your expectations realistically. If you know that contact can be challenging, then don't go in there hoping that it's going to all be fine this time. If we set our expectations, knowing what the challenge is and preparing for that, so we know how our child is going to respond and how they're going to come out of contact, it can ease our anxiety during that contact period when that's happening, if we're facilitating that contact, or if we're outside and waiting for our child to come out afterwards.
I was going to add as well, Laura, an example of when you might be supervising that contact, because I think that do happen for some of our parents, where they are in the contact room, they might be supervising that contact, and and you're looking at the interactions really, or facilitating that positive contact session between the child and their birth family, or including siblings and things, but having a plan for kind of all eventualities, I think, and how you would typically respond in certain situations. So if there is a conversation that may come up that you feel like shouldn't be communicated to the child, then how do you manage that in that moment, and having a plan?
Pre-planning that.
Yeah.
I think this is really relevant in sibling contact as well. So lots of siblings, when they have sibling contact, they struggle with those social relationships. So you might have one that's overbearing over the other one, or arguments might start fairly quickly. They might wind each other up. So you have calm children who are all of a sudden really not calm because they're winding each other up. So think about how, if you're overseeing that sibling contact, instead of thinking, well, they can only manage for this amount of time and then we're done, how can you put input into that to support them to be able to manage that? So is it with a lot of modelling of how we interact? That's how one of the recommendations that we would make is to do a lot of modelling. Is it by planning an activity where there's more structure and there's more, you can manage more around that? Because ultimately we want to support those relationships to progress into the future. And if we can coach siblings to be able to interact and be able to have really positive contact together, then that's going to be far better for them in the longer term.
Yeah, definitely. It's so relevant for sibling contact and how they interact with one another. Being really prepared for that, scaffolding that play to make that positive. Because some children cannot really get on. Some children might not even know how to interact with one another, so you might have to plan for that.
I just remember, I have memories of this sibling contact that I was involved in, where separately the children were very calm, they were engaging in different activities and they were absolutely fine, and they came together, and there was 3 of them, and they would be climbing on top of all of the furniture, jumping off, trying to jump on each other. It was absolute chaos, but you knew that they had the ability to sit and settle and be able to undertake an activity.
Yeah.
Because they could do it on their own. What they didn't know how to do is how to do it together, and they just wound each other up. So then they needed that adult involvement to make that contact positive, and instead of that view of they just can't be together. It was, how can adults guide that?
That's really important. Like they got that ability, but choosing to do something different.
It was all that they'd experienced. Whenever they'd been together, that's all that they'd done. So when they came together, it was it was a we'd call it differently in behaviour analysis, but it was a signal to, okay, we jump on everything and we climb on everything. So it just gave them this signal, and they all started doing it. So it's just changing those patterns.
Yeah, and you've only got pair of hands to like, who would you go to first?
It was honestly like
that was interesting. And that just moves us on to things that we can be thinking about after contact, and similarly to what we would do before is planning for that. Some children might come out of contact feeling excited, they've enjoyed that experience, but like we said, that's not the experience for all children. So thinking about what we can plan after contact, normalising some of those conversations like around family contact, and those conversations that you might have about contact, but also planning something maybe together. I've advised that sometimes in those in cases where between parent and child, we're just going to have a little bit of one-to-one time in like a bit of in a quiet arena, just so we can process what's just happened.
Have that connection, because you can see, and it can be immediately after contact, but it can also be longer after contact that difficulties arise. So building that connection afterwards, and having that activity set up so they know before contact, so it gives them that reassurance of I'm coming back to you and we're going to do this activity together, can be really helpful. And having that downtime, having that time together, and what you said, I think, about normalising conversations around contact is really important, because we work with a number of children who it might not be immediately after contact that they become distressed. It might be later in the evening, or you might see something like an increase in bedwetting or an increase in nightmares after contact. So it's about that normalisation and being able to have those conversations so they do confide in you when those things happen, and then being able to provide that reassurance and comfort as well.
I think also conversations where we are putting on a united front, so like parents, carers, family and professionals, we are all one team. We're not working against each other. We all want the best for this child, and communicating that with them. So, you know, hope Mammy was okay today, and how is she feeling, and not grilling them in terms of like what happened in that contact, but showing an interest and showing that we are putting on this united front as a team around the child. I think it's important.
I think another thing to be mindful of that can reduce your anxiety as well is not take anything personally if it's directed at you. Any contact situation can be difficult for children because they can feel pulled in different directions. If you're their primary carer and they spend all of their time with you, and then they go into contact with mum or dad, and mum or dad are saying we love you, we miss you, when they come back to you, they're going to feel this push-pull, they're going to feel pulled in different directions. And it's quite natural for some of our children to reject us at that point. So we just want to not take it personally, understand it for what it is, understand that it will settle back down, but it is contact having an impact. And I think also recognising the benefits of contact in those situations as well, because I think that is one of those times where you can say, actually, this isn't working and contact should stop. But if contact stops, what would be the repercussions of that in terms of identity, connection with family? So really thinking about the wider picture as well, but knowing that any behaviour that comes after contact is not a reflection of you, and sometimes you do need to ride it out.
I was going to add, Laura, like another way to reframe some of that is, what is my child trying to communicate to me in this moment? They're not saying that I hate you or they're pushing you away. They're trying to communicate a different need, whether they are experiencing a conflict in how reflect on their relationship with you versus their family, but try and think, what are they communicating to me? Because they're not being hurtful towards me. I'm just at the end of that, and you can then go on to look at that very differently and support in the way that you intend to then.
Yeah.
So Laura, we've got a question from a foster carer who's really struggling with their child after contact. So they're seeing high levels of challenging behaviour, and they are considering having a conversation with a social worker about reducing contact. So what advice would you provide?
Yeah, I think this is a situation that many parents and carers find themselves in, and so as we've talked about throughout the podcast, that we would advocate for contact because it promotes so many different things like identity, it can promote belonging, and it can really support children to know where they came from, and it is important for them to maintain and keep those family relationships because that feeds so much into their identity and who they are. But there are times when contact can be having such an impact that it does need to reduce, but that needs to be really assessed carefully. So what I would say is, if you're seeing this pattern, is to note those patterns down. So do this very specifically around contact. So what pattern are you seeing leading up to contact? What happens on the contact day? What happens after contact? And what's the effects that you're seeing for the time after contact as well, which could be the same day, but it could be weeks, it could be 2 weeks. Because what you want to be able to see is the pattern. When I'm looking at a contact reduction, what I would be looking at is, does the child have opportunity in between those contact sessions to settle? So there's a period where we're not seeing these spikes in behaviour or this spike in dysregulation or upset. that's impacting on the child and then also impacting on the carer as well. I think as a social worker looking at this, we need to think about placement stability, and if there's lots of pressure on that placement, the carer is really anxious, then is that going to impact on the placement stability as well? So there's lots of factors, but what we want to see is there is a gap between contact where there is that stability. If the difficulties that we're seeing are solely around the contact, if it's something different, then you won't see that stability in between. But if it is just linked to contact, you want to see that stability, and that we're not getting to a point where we're stable and then we're entering a new contact period immediately. Because if you've got that and you're just about becoming stable and then you're starting a new contact period, that's probably a sign that contact needs to be a little bit further apart to allow that stability to happen. But you only know that by really noting that information down over multiple contacts. So that's what I'd recommend as a starting point, is having a specific log where you just log those difficulties around contact. And the impact it's not only having on the child, but the impact it's having on the family as well, the carer's family, and the difficulties that you're dealing with, so that the social worker can see the whole picture to be able to assess if there should be a reduction.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, because everything that we've spoken about on this podcast today is how sometimes we should be expecting some increases in challenges around contact, and we've spoken about how we can plan for that. But if this is happening regularly, and like you said, there's no let up, for when these behaviours are happening, how you as parents and carers can be supporting the decision making in the data or the information that we can be collecting to assess whether a contact is having that it is being beneficial. I think that's a great piece of advice. So that brings us to the end of our podcast. So the key takeaways from the episode today: we have discussed the maybe difficulties that might come up around family contact, and how that can be quite anxiety provoking for parents and carers, and giving you some tips on how you can best manage that to best support your child. So I hope you've taken at least one tip away from today that you can put into practice for the next family contact session.
So if you want to know more about trauma-informed care, then subscribe to Tribe Talk for more trauma-informed care in practice.